We've had about 17,000 migrants cross the Channel, haven't we? Over 100,000, by the way, was the milestone that was passed since, I think, 2018. Of course, you've seen the sad loss of life at the weekend. Peter, there was a leaked memo about the potential placement of these people, which referenced time spans as long as 5 years in some cases, which gives the impression that this is not going away anytime soon. The government clearly don't think it is. So have we just got to get used to this?
Well, it would be wise for them to plan, wouldn't it? Because they have so far failed so completely to get any sort of grip on it. The real problem is that the Channel used to be partly a physical and partly a psychological barrier. People didn't think you could cross it. And then they discovered that they could. And it turned out to be extraordinarily easy, provided the weather was good. And so there is now this enormous difficulty. My view on this has been for a long time, if you want to stop it, and it's not by any means the only migration problem this country has. Legal migration into this country is huge, and on a scale which I think is
606,000 net migration.
Is not being carefully thought about by those who have to provide the resources and the places to live and the schools and the hospitals for the vastly increased population we're rapidly getting. But leave that aside for a moment. The only real solution to the problem, as indeed it would be to the similar problem of crossing the Mediterranean, is to stop people from getting into the boats in the first place. And for this, we have to rely on France. And I think we have not tried sufficiently or negotiated hard enough with the French about the job which they have to do, in my view, of preventing these people from getting into the boats in the first place. No one can stop it entirely, but the one actual force which can seriously restrain it is the French state. And if we can get the French state on our side, and it would be very, very costly to do so, and I don't doubt that, then we can make an impact on it. But otherwise, I don't think it's going to change.
No, I definitely don't think it's going to change, and my viewers certainly would agree with that. But Alex, you know, even at the weekend, you saw the very sad, situation where people were in the Channel drowning, very close actually to the French shore. But yet, even despite that, those people were then brought over into Dover. So it seems that the will of the French is lacking, to put it mildly.
Yeah, there are 2 points that I've seen disputed in the most recent incidents. The first is how close they were to the French shore, but I've never seen any suggestion they were closer to the UK. They were clearly much closer to France than they were to here. And the second is whether the broader French policy is effectively to escort boats once they're in the water to the UK, rather than seeking to turn them back. Supposedly the French have this policy that once the boat's underway, it would be too much of a danger to try and turn the boat around, and therefore the safest thing to do is effectively act as a ferrying service, or at least a chaperoning service to these shores. And there's disputes about both of those things. But what has basically convinced me about this point that Peter has made, that the biggest onus is on the French and what they do, is the arguments to be made by Tim Lawton MP, because he's made the point this week in the debates about this, that when the French police seek to stop those coming to the United Kingdom unlawfully, they only act in the time between getting on a boat and that boat setting off. And if they stop them, they just release them back into the wild. They just let them back to roam in the bushes and the dunes until they can try again. Now, someone found in this country without a lawful reason or right to be here will, in some way or other, and we can debate how sympathetically and how they get treated and where they stay and so forth, but someone in that situation in the United Kingdom is dealt with in one way or another by the authorities. The French system is effectively catch and release. The French system is, unless they are actually in the water, at which point you're going to bring them back and they're about to set out into the water, but they haven't actually gone past your knees, then you can stop their boat and bring them back. But then they let them go. So the responsibility is almost entirely on the French, because we would not do that at all in this country. We seek to deal with them.
I think you're being overly fair to our own authorities. It seems to me that when a lot of people, when they arrive here, they may encounter the authorities, but they're pretty much left to their own devices in many cases. And all the figures that we have for people coming ashore are of those who have actually encountered the authorities. We don't know.
At least our policy is to try. It seems that the official French policy is, once apprehended, to simply release them.
I mean, I'm not praising the behaviour of the forces of law of either nation in this particularly, but I don't think that we have much on the French in this myself. Once people have arrived in this country, they tend to stay.
Let me ask you very quickly, the ECHR, we go around in this circle all the time. Whenever there's an issue, whenever there's a big crossing day, this concept of leaving the ECHR always comes up. Would you support that or not?
I don't think it'll make any difference. I think that the problem is that particularly the EU countries, which includes, of course, France, would take the view that if we pulled out of the ECHR, they would then pull out of other quite important trading and other agreements with us. They would punish us very, very heavily economically for doing so. It wouldn't be a cost-free event, and I think that's why government's afraid of doing it. Whenever, you know when the Tories are in real trouble, they start talking about getting out of the ECHR. But I don't think they mean it would be. It's all very well saying, well, the Canadians don't have an ECHR. They do have their own homegrown Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which has many bad effects on Canada. But the fact is, we have got the ECHR. We have not merely signed it, but we've enshrined it under the Blair government in our own law. And we're stuck with it. And people don't realise just how little freedom of action modern governments have in such matters, and how much we can be punished for breaking away from this. So I doubt very much, A, whether anything will happen, or B, if it did, that it would work. The problem that we have to face is, I say, we have to control our own immigration by deciding that that's what we want to do, with all the political consequences, with matters that we're sovereign over. And over the crossing of the Channel by migrants, we have to get the French, and I say it will cost a great deal, and it will need a great deal of very tough diplomacy. We have to get the French to stop them leaving shores of France in the first place.
Where are you on that ECHR thing?
The notion that somebody can cross many safe nations in order to cherry-pick where they wish to apply for asylum or refugee status is currently true under international law, and in my view it makes an absolute mockery of international law and current interpretations of human rights. I'd leave the ECHR.
But what about the unintended consequences that other people might highlight? So you're hearing there about potential tamperings with trade relations and all the rest of it. What about that?
The other countries are entitled to seek to respond as they wish. They can have tantrums if they wish. But you were asking us whether or not intellectually and philosophically the right thing to do would be to continue to cleave to that organisation or not.
I'm not talking about tantrums. We're saying here there are actually in agreements which we've signed. We have pledged to remain within the ECHR. The ECHR, you know better than most how much I despise the surrender we made in Northern Ireland, but the ECHR is pretty much embodied in the agreements we have there.
People raise that about the Good Friday.
No one has to have a tantrum. All they need to do is say, you said you'd do this in return for this, you haven't done it, so we will now hamper trade and other relations with you in response to what you've done. We are not. The problem with this country, ever since the 1970s, is that it has given away so much of its sovereignty, and people don't realise how little room for manoeuvre a British government has in these matters. I would wish it were otherwise. But if people want to take those routes, they have to understand that they have hard consequences, which they may find harder to deal with than they expect. I don't like it. I'm not advocating it. I'm just saying this is what we face.
There are prices to bear for being a sovereign country. Proper defence and control of one's borders is part of being a sovereign country. If there are prices to bear, they are to be borne.